In the political world, the divide between right and left is at the forefront of every discussion. To say that it influences everything, from policy, media, and culture, is not an exaggeration. But where did they come from? How do they differ? And is this even the right way to measure politics? The idea of right and left did not start out originally as a political philosophy or even disagreement or school of thought. It comes from one man who helped create our modern understanding, Jacques Alexandre Césaire Charles Clément de Gaulleville, during the French Revolution. On August 29, 1789, Baron de Gaulleville wrote in his journal that, quote, "We were beginning to recognize one another. Those who were attached to their religion and to the king had taken up positions on the president's right, in order to avoid the shouting, the remarks, and the indecencies that took place on the opposite section." Again, in April of 1970, the following year, Gaulleville wrote that, quote, "Upon reading the minutes of the evening session of May 29th, I insisted that mention be made that the right side of the assembly had caused the murmuring, so that in the future there would be a clear distinction between the right and the left." It is important to note that while he is not credited as the creator of these terms, he is cited by many historians as a credible first-hand account to the seating order of the National Constituent Assembly. He was also heavily biased toward the monarchy, and his writings are harsh toward the Revolutionist Party of France at that time. On March 22, 1791, the L'Ami du Roi, or the Friend of the King, newspaper created a visual showing those in favor and those against the civil constitution of the clergy. The opposers were written on the right, and those who supported it to the left. It is important to note that this is a satirical paper with its own biases in favor of the king. Its own name, The Friend of the King, should tell you all you need to know about any potential biases it may have. It is from this newspaper and journal entries that we see one of the most lasting effects of the Revolution's political language, and over time our modern understanding has evolved and become more clear, but it is within the French Revolution that the concept of the political left and the political right was born. In their book, The Government and Politics of France, Andrew Knapp and Vincent Wright describe the two sides as, quote, "globally opposed political families, each with a distinct set of common values, characterizing the left as the party of movement and the right as the party of order." This is a useful framing and lens to keep in mind as we go through specifics because it shows up again and again, both in social and economic differences. In an attempt to steelman both sides of the aisle, I pulled from Andrew Heywood's Key Concepts in Political and International Relations for an explanation of what each side values in society. He describes that the left-wing values focus on things like, quote, "freedom, equality, fraternity, rights, progress, reform, and internationalism," end quote. In practice, this means a belief that fairness sometimes requires active correction, not just equal treatment on paper, support for anti-discrimination protections, or policies aimed at closing gaps between different groups. It shows a preference for reform over tradition, on the belief that institutions should keep evolving and reflect new understanding, rather than staying fixed in how things have always been done. For example, this is the instinct behind expanding civil rights protections over time, or supporting international cooperation through trade agreements and organizations like the European Union or United Nations, on the idea that shared global problems need shared global solutions. However, when taken to its furthest extreme, this can slide into a kind of internationalism that erodes national identity and sovereignty altogether, or reform at all cost mindset that disregards tradition and institutions before anything's ready to replace them. Andrew Knapp and Vincent Wright argue that, quote, "for its critics, the left was regularly guilty of crass and intolerant anti-clericalism, unrealistic social reformism, doctrinaire Marxism, and class hatred." Heywood describes the right wing as more concerned with, quote, "notions of authority, hierarchy, order, duty, tradition, reaction, and nationalism," end quote. In practice, this means a belief that long-standing institutions such as family, religious tradition, or established cultural norms have been tested by time and hold society together, even when they're imperfect. It also shows up as a preference for stability over rapid change and a belief that a country needs a clear sense of its own identity and borders in order to function. For example, this is the instinct behind supporting stronger immigration enforcement or even remigration, or resisting the reshaping of long-standing institutions like marriage or religious practice, on the belief that these structures shouldn't be dismantled faster than society can adjust. However, when taken to its furthest extreme, it can slide into the rigid authoritarianism, where duty and order are enforced rather than upheld voluntarily, or into an ethnic nationalism that closes a country off from the outside world entirely. Quote, For the left, this translates as a selfish and reactionary opposition to long overdue measures of social justice, and a penchant for authoritarianism and repression, writes Andrew Knapp and Vincent Wright. Heywood also states on the nature of their economic views that, quote, left-wing views support intervention and collectivism, and right-wing ones favor the market and individualism. Using this definition, we can look at left-wing economics in this way. Collectivism is when the group, whether that is the state, race, or even social class, is more important than the individual. In the economic case, group or state ownership, planning, and the common good take priority over individual profit and private property. This leads naturally to the view that economic intervention, when the government, federal or state, steps in and influences the market with taxes, regulations, and price control if necessary. The government will do what it needs to make sure the economy is as stable as they can make it. The benefits to this are things like public government-owned property like Forest Service, BLM, national and state parks, and even your local fish and game lands. This also encompasses things like public schools, healthcare, and social welfare. However, when taken to its furthest extreme, we see the rise of socialism and communism, with heavy mandated government control of production, with forced quotas and rationing of food, with the lack of private property. I would highly recommend Jimmy Talks' video on this, which I will link in the description below. Right-wing economics, using this example given by Heywood, supports individualism. That is when the individual person and their choices, labor, and property takes priority over the group. In the economic case, this shows up as capitalism. Private ownership, private business, and personal profit take priority over collective or state control. This gives rise to the free market, where prices, production, and wages are left to adjust naturally to supply and demand without government intervention. For example, if oil is high in demand but low supply, the price of gas and its byproducts will rise to reflect that as the market corrects itself, rather than a regulator stepping in to set the price. The rise of private businesses under this system creates competition, with companies racing to offer the best value at the cheapest price in order to win customers. The benefits to this are things like innovation, customer choice, and the ability to build and own something entirely on your own, free from government interference. However, when taken to its furthest extreme, we see everything become privatized, even the very basics of daily life brought back through subscriptions and leases rather than owned outright. In effect, leading to where nothing is truly owned, only rented or subscribed to. For further information, I would recommend Illustrate to Educate's video, which I will link in the description as well. We have spent this entire video talking about the left and the right as if it is a single line, as if you are either more toward one or the other. But is that actually how politics work? Political scientists have proposed models that contain more than one axis. The most common is an axis for economic views, state control versus free market, and one for social and authority views, authoritarian versus libertarian. The two most well-known of these multi-axis charts are the political compass and the Nolan chart. There are two studies that I would like to talk about where we can see the complexity and the necessity of a multi-axis approach. In 2011, a Reason Roop poll found that, quote, Americans cannot easily be bundled into either liberal or conservative groups, end quote. Instead of asking the basics, are you a liberal or are you a conservative, the poll asked two questions. How much government involvement do you want in the economy, and how much do you want in social and personal issues? Sorting people by both answers revealed four groups instead of two. 28% conservative, 28% liberal, 24% libertarian, who want less government in both areas, and 20% communitarian, who want more government in both. This means that more than 4 in 10 people in this poll didn't fit the standard left-right mold because they held consistent positions that a single line doesn't have room for. Similarly, Pew Research found this in their published findings of a 2025 survey. They say that, quote, many Americans hold a complex mix of values and beliefs that don't always fit neatly into either majority party, end quote. They found that within the right and left ideologies, there were significant more nuance in regard to what would be seen as a typical right or left stance. For example, Pew found that of the two groups on the right, the No Apologies right and the Faith First conservatives are strongly aligned behind President Trump and the MAGA movement. The No Apologies right was found to take harder positions on most issues, while the Faith First conservatives were more concerned with religion and morals. Both are considered part of the political right, but for different reasons, with different concerns and issues. Pew also found a similar split on the left. Leftward progressives and loyal liberals are both firmly Democratic and critical of Trump, but they differ in emphasis. Leftward progressives are the youngest and most systemically critical group with more skepticism of the economic system and U.S. military power and far more open to politicians who identify as democratic socialists. The loyal liberals, meanwhile, hold broadly to progressive values but with stronger trust in existing institutions and are more likely to believe the current system can still deliver prosperity. And they're the strongest supporters of America's traditional alliances like NATO. Both are considered part of the left, but for different reasons, with different concerns and priorities. Between these two studies, the picture that emerges is this: a huge share of people don't fit the typical left-right line at all, and even the people who do fit within the left and right fit for completely different reasons. Faith-first conservatives and the no apologies right both land on the right, but one is more driven by faith and tradition, the other by a harder, more combative political style. Leftward progressives and loyal liberals both land on the left, but one is deeply skeptical of the system itself, while the other believes that the system can work. Nearly half of the country, according to the Reason Roop numbers, don't consistently land on either side at all. It is worth remembering how this whole idea started. It is based upon where a group of biased men happened to sit in a room in 1789. This doesn't mean that the left and right are meaningless, however. The values and differences are real. But the next time a label gets used to explain an entire person, it is worth remembering that the same label barely holds together the people inside of it, let alone the millions it leaves out entirely. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm trying out some new formats, so let me know what you thought of this. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments. If you liked it, leave me a like. If you disliked it, there's also a dislike button. If you thought that I was unbiased or that I was misrepresenting one side, let me know in the comments as well. I'm interested to hear your guys' thoughts. And thank you guys so much. God bless. And praying for you guys, America first and America only. And thank you guys again so much.